Hi, in this video I will be discussing data structure. Where do we store all our files and folders, and also discuss the concept of presets and favorites when you configure some of RaceReplay's features. So in the latest version of RaceReplay, we now try to handle a lot of this folder structure for the users. So this is how it works. When you run RaceReplay for the first time, the first thing you should do is to add a root folder for your boat. And the best way to do that is to click on the Add Boat button here. Type in the name of your boat and where you would like the root folder to be for all your analysis. Make sure you also have this auto-create folder structure box ticked, and as well as the add Rexy folders if you're going to use the new Rexy K&D tools. Click OK. So it's added by my boat name, and it has created a root folder where I asked it to, and already created some subfolders. So the main ones here are going to be one for the year, and in fact you should have one folder for every year of sailing. And then there's a config folder which has a bunch of subfolders which we will discuss shortly. So let's go into the 2020 folder, and by default RaceReplay has added this 2020-08 template regatta. So I'm just going to rename this to my first regatta. And let's have a quick look at what is inside there. In there, RaceReplay created a set of subfolders, which is where all your files will get stored and where you should place them. So I've got on the side here all the data for my sailing, and so I'm going to slide it over to my my RaceReplay folder structure. So let's start with my boat log. So this is going to go inside my logs directory. I've got an event file. This will go into the events directory, and a config file. For more on the config file, please view the video on config files. And I'm going to slide this into config files. So I also have a polar, which is in the document format. So polars go in the config directory, which is at the root. Remember, if we have our boat directory is C my boat, well, we have a config folder in there and a polars subfolder. This is where it should go. So place it in here. Click to close that. It's always good to check on the on the options tab that it's assigned correctly the project folder, the presets folder, and the targets folder, which is both of these are in the configs directory. Going back to the main files here, now I want to specify my log, config file, and event file, and now RaceReplay should detect automatically where they are. So click on here, and the first one, I'm going to have to tell it where's my log file. So my log file was in 2020 in my first regatta in logs. Now once I've done that, it basically knows which regatta to point to. So if I go for a config file, it went to the correct place, and I can add my config file. Same for an event file. It knows where to go and it finds my event file. And for the polar, I'm going to specify a polar, and that is going to be of type deckman, which is why I'm not seeing it. And here it is. Now I'm ready to start RaceReplay. Note that we've got a directory for each regatta. It can also be for each sailing session if you're just doing some training. And so in this logs folder will go all the logs for this regatta or sailing session. When you are about to, when you want to create a folder structure for a new regatta, you click on the start page, File, Add Regatta. And this one is going to be, say, in September, and it's going to be my second regatta. And this will create another folder with exactly the same structure as the previous one, and you can start new. So I've now started RaceReplay. As you can see, I've got some events, and in preparation I've made some phases already, which are 30-second phases, in order to illustrate what I would like to show you in this video. So let's start with time graphs. So if I go to the graph menu and click on time graph, I can create a new one and say that here I would like to see truant speed and truant angle, and maybe scale that up to 20 minutes and have everything auto scale nicely. Now this is a graph that I will be looking at very often, so I want to keep it as a preset. In order to do that, I click on presets and save. It took me to my root folder, config presets time graphs, and proposes a name of truant angle, truant speed XML, which is a very good name, so I'll save that. And it's automatically added as a favorite. As you can see, the star is now yellow. Now what that does is if I close this graph, then at any time I can now go back to graph, time graphs, and my truant angle, truant speed graph is quickly available here. And this will be saved from session to session. In any case, I can also load from file here, presets loads. Maybe now I can click on this one and it will come again. Right, this is time graphs. Now that we have phases, let's also look at some graphing we can do with phases and how this presets thing works. So I'll click on graph and have an XY graph. So this is my XY graph. Let's maybe focus, I think there's both upwind and downwind phases. Maybe let's look at only the downwind phases. So I'll go custom here and only take the downwind phases. Click OK. And here we go. I've got phases displaying truant speed versus boat speed. And it's colored by boat speed. And let's add a trend line in here. Add a single trend line. And click OK, leave the defaults, and say this is a graph that I quite like. And so in the same way, I can click on this star. It's going to prompt me to save into my boat config presets XY graphs, and it's going to be called boat speed versus truant speed. I can save that. So first of all, it's going to appear in the favorites here, which is always interesting. So let's see, let's say I also want to look at heel now. So truant speed versus heel. Now it's displayed the proper data, but my trend line is still the trend line that I made from the previous one. So if I double click on trend and I can click reload data set, and I have another trend which is for truant speed and function of heel, and I can add that as a favorite as well. It's going to ask me to save it in the files. Now once I've done that, I've got two quick access buttons here. I can click go back to boat speed versus truant speed or heel versus truant speed. So that's quite handy. When you have a new day, new data, you've got all your presets made and it's very quick to access them. Now, if I want to modify this heel versus truant speed and say maybe the trend line, I want it to be dash and I want the font size to be a little bit smaller, I click OK. I need to save this and I just click on this save button here. And if I go back to boat speed, it's now saved my new trend line. Now let's say that I am no longer interested in this heel versus truant speed trend line, preset. All I need to do is I need to select it once and then uncheck the favorites. And it's still there, but it's gone from my quick access favorites. And it's still in my preset, so I can always get back to it at any time. Let's look at another graph. We have VMG graphs, for instance. Close this and open an upwind. Oh, we need downwind data. Let's go for downwind data. VMG graph. It's now open. Let's do some customizing and say that I prefer my polar to be in smaller and in blue. And I also want to add trend lines here, add a single trend line, and this is going to be for port tack. Make it a bit smaller, and call it just P. And I want to add another trend line, this time for starboard tack. Click OK on that. So I've got my two trend lines of the day. I can add other graphs, the VMG percentage down here, and we've got another tab with data plotted in comparison to the polar. So this is real values of boat speed, and this one here is delta to your polar target boat speed. Right, I've now configured this graph the way I like it, and I want to make sure I can save it for my next session where I will do the exact same study. So I click on presets, save this, and it took me to my boat config presets VMG graphs, and I'll call it downwind VMG graph by default. So this little XML file contains all the description of how all the configuration I just did, which was changing the polar line color and size and adding those trend lines. So if I save this, now let's remove everything I've done and change everything back to maybe the way it was, and choose another color by sail. Well, in theory, if I go to my presets and I load my downwind VMG graph, I got everything sorted in the way that I wanted. Maybe it's just missing didn't refresh the color. But there it is, a little bug which will get fixed very soon. So this is the use of presets and favorites.